All right, so we're going to talk about the history and future of space exploration. All right, the beginnings of space exploration. People have actually been exploring space as long as they've been looking at the sky at night. I mean, when we think about space exploration, we usually think about, going into space with, astronauts going into space on rockets, but really looking at the night sky is exploring space. Even ancient cultures, thousands of years ago, observed the night skies. This is an ancient Mayan observatory here in Central America. And people could see things at night sky, like the Milky Way here. We usually don't see the Milky Way these days because there's too much light at night, light pollution from street lights and from lights on people's houses and cities. But, the ancient people had no lights at night, and they could see the beautiful night sky that we can't see now. All right, so why did people study the night sky? Well, they believed the stars were home to their gods. Greek and Roman gods, the constellations, the names of the constellations that we still use today are based on Greek and Roman gods, and they thought that the skies were where they lived, and so they named the stars and the planets and the constellations after them. Many ancient cultures also used astronomy to predict when to plant crops, when the seasons were going to change by the constellations and the stars that they saw at night. So astronomy was actually very important to them because, people really didn't realize that, every year you're going to have the seasons change. They weren't aware of that, and so they would look to the skies to see if the constellations that they thought should be there would come, and if they saw the constellation, then they knew the seasons were going to change and life would be okay. And here we've got a couple of pictures. This is an ancient Egyptian picture that is showing things from astronomy, and this is an ancient Chinese star map that shows different constellations in the sky. All right. When you go outside and look at the sky during the night or even during the day, it appears like the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars revolve around the Earth. Okay, you go outside and look. It looks like we're standing in the middle, and the sun is going around us, and the moon is going around us, and the stars are going around us. Okay, because of these observations, ancient people thought Earth was at the center of the solar system. I mean, why not? That's what they observed. If you see something, it must be true, right? So they called this the geocentric model of the solar system. Geocentric. Geo means Earth, and centric means centered. Okay, this is a picture of the sky and the Earth being at the center. So for a long time, thousands of years, people believed that the Earth was at the center of the solar system because that's what they observed. I mean, it's the same way. Think of it this way. People used to think the Earth was flat because look around you, it looks flat. Okay, it took many thousands of years for people to realize that this wasn't true. Okay, so modern space exploration began in 1610. Now that doesn't sound very modern, does it? I mean, that was over 400. That was 400 years ago. 405 years ago this year. Galileo Galilei, an Italian scientist, first looked at the night sky through a telescope. So it was sometime before then that telescopes were first invented, when lenses were invented and used to see things far away. Well, he was the first person that was known to have actually pointed a telescope at the night sky and started looking at things. Of course, probably the first thing he looked at was the moon because it's the biggest and most obvious thing. And you can see here he drew pictures of what he observed about the moon, the craters, and how the different phases of the moon were. Okay. Probably the most interesting things that he saw 4 of Jupiter's moons. Okay. People knew planets were up there because they could see them, but they looked pretty much like stars. They may be a little bit bigger. I mean, if you've ever seen a planet at night, it looks like a star, maybe just a little bit bigger than a star and brighter. Well, when he looked at Jupiter, he noticed that Jupiter had moons. He could see them. Okay, there's some little drawings here. I know it's kind of hard to see, but he on different nights he would notice that the little dots or the little stars around Jupiter were in different positions. Well, that's because they're orbiting around Jupiter, and on different nights they would be in different locations, and he could see that. He could observe that. Okay, he's the first person to ever observe a moon of another planet, and the fact that they were orbiting, that was really earth-shattering at the time. He also saw that Saturn had rings, which was just amazing. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. And that Venus has phases like the moon. Sometimes you look at Venus, it'll be just a little crescent. Other times it'll be, kind of, you can see half the planet, and still other times you can see the full planet. So he made these really, really big discoveries in the early 1600s. Okay. The next big step in space exploration and astronomy was in the late 1600s and 1660s. Sir Isaac Newton invented a reflecting telescope. Okay, this one uses a curved mirror instead of lenses, and it was quite a bit better telescope than what Galileo had. You may recognize Isaac Newton as the person who first wrote the laws of gravity. So he was really a scientist who was into many different things, and he invented a reflecting telescope. And he used his reflecting telescope to see the same moons of Jupiter that Galileo saw. So this is another person with another instrument making the same observations that Galileo did. And so that kind of confirmed, we always talk about in science that, if you want to prove something in science, other people have got to be able to repeat your experiments. Well, here we go. Galileo is repeating the experiments Galileo's experiments are being repeated by Newton, and he's confirming the things that Galileo saw. So, when Galileo and Newton and other astronomers began making better observations with telescopes, and as more people studied the stars and planets, they realized that Earth could not possibly be at the center of the solar system. It just didn't make sense with what they were observing. Okay? And, another big thing that helped with this is that Galileo noticed that Jupiter had moons and they were orbiting around it. Okay? So their observations, showed that the sun couldn't be at the center of the solar system. So they realized that the sun must be at the center of the solar system. And once they started drawing diagrams of how this could work, they realized that this must be true. Okay? And that's called the heliocentric model of the solar system. Helio means sun and centric means centered. So we developed this heliocentric or sun-centered model of the solar system and the universe, and this was very controversial at the time because for thousands of years people had thought that Earth was at the center, and this made people uneasy, especially different religions. They thought that, well, this is blasphemous. I mean, you're basically saying that what was in the Bible was not true, or was that, God's word wasn't true. And they were saying, no, that's not what we're saying. It's just our observations are a little bit different. And so some of these people were even jailed because of their beliefs. But it wasn't really a belief, it was an observation, and it turns out to be completely true.